Natural law. We start right at the beginning with the links between Aquinas and Aristotle. So the top two boxes are for your comparisons between Aristotle and Aquinas. Aristotle is your empiricist, is your scientist, is your father of formology, so that goes in the first box. So your two separations are just like they are on the sheet. Everything in the natural world has a purpose. Human telos is to reach eudaimonia. Eudaimonia meaning what? Human flourishing. Very good, Louisa. Reason is the way to work this out. Please be very clear. Eudaimonia is Aristotle's idea. Aristotle has nothing to do with God. His views are about science. Aquinas, on the other hand, was inspired by Aristotle, but he believes our telos, our purpose, is to gain godlike perfection, become godlike. This is done using the gift of reason, which is from God. Reason can work out. Reason can be used to find out what God wants through the workings of nature. So reason has been given to us as a gift in order to work out what our telos and how to gain our telos is. So please be very clear. Aquinas never ever talks of eudaimonia. Aquinas talks of godlike perfection. So this is a really good place to start an essay. This is very, very good for your introduction, where you were establishing Aquinas' views and how he was inspired by Aristotle's philosophy. Don't forget, please summarise. Please make your notes as clear and as short as possible, just because we have a long way to go. Alright, so your larger box underneath then is for how natural law develops. So that's what goes into that box, so you might want to write along it or use it in different sections. The main ethical principle at the time of Aquinas, when Aquinas was alive, was called the divine command theory. It does exactly what it says in the name. Divine is God command. God commands what is right and wrong. The problems with this is God could have said anything, and God did. In the Bible, God said it's all right to kill your homosexual neighbours. God said it's all right to stone your rebellious teenagers. So when God is commanding what is right and wrong, God could have said anything. The other problem with that is, what about atheists? The other problem is, what about new laws or new teachings? And so Aquinas did not like the divine command theory. So the whole point of natural law was to avoid the divine command theory. So the divine command theory was the view of the time. This was the view people followed. Aquinas did not agree with it. He wanted to establish a theory that was open to everyone, that everyone was capable of achieving and being able to achieve, so the telos. And so he created the natural law theory. This proposed that nature decides what is right and wrong. God made nature, so there's the link there, but it works on its own towards its own telos. Ethics come not from God, but from nature. This is very, very important, because everyone can experience nature, because nature is universal. It means that everyone can be ethical, not just if you follow God. Yes, God made nature, because he still has faith, so he still believes God made everything, but nature works on its own. This means Aquinas combined the science, nature of Aristotle, with God. That last point there is very, very important. Many students say that Aristotle did the natural law theory. Absolutely not. Aristotle had nothing to do with the Christian idea of God. Natural law has the Christian God with science, or with logic, with nature. So it's the combination of those two views that makes natural law, and that was done by Aquinas. All right, so the triangle underneath is, of course, for the 40 years of law, so please lay out your triangle. Human law is at the bottom, so these are the laws of the nation, laws of society, laws of your culture, laws of your school. So one of our laws is wearing your lanyards for identification so that people know that you belong to the college. It might be the laws of the nation, such as do not murder. Above that is natural law. Very surprisingly, to say that this is his argument, it only comes second from the bottom. Why? Because you've still got the influence of God above. So natural law is the moral law of God with human nature. Everyone has a natural sense that good is to be done and evil avoided. Can anybody remember what that is called, that good is to be done and evil avoided? Synderesis rule, very quick, very good, Sam. It directs our conscience, and if applied with reason to a situation, can lead to the right action. So natural law is about reason, conscience, and doing what is good and right. Above that is your divine law. This is your Sermon on the Mount, your Decalogue, your Bible, your divine law by people like the Pope or priests. Sam?
Isn't divine law just divine command theory?
Divine command theory, yes, spoken by people. So it has to be in there somewhere, though, because he's still a man of faith, so there has to be the God element there. Yeah. But what he's saying is you also take into account what the translations of people say. So, for example, taking on what the church says, the tradition says, and what the denomination says. So the denominations, like the Pope, often are flexible when looking at what the Bible says in order to apply it to modern day. So it's not just looking at what God says.
Command theory wasn't flexible.
Yes, exactly. So the divine command theory isn't flexible. It's just what God says, and that's what you have to follow. Anything that's not there, tough. Whereas the divine law looks more at what the people take inspiration from as well. Yeah, very good question, Sam. The top is the eternal law, which is the mind of God. This is beyond all human capabilities. And it's the idea that we get reflection. Do you remember it like the form of the good reflects the goodness down? This is very similar. The eternal law reflects down. So it reflects down into the divine law, obviously, because the divine law links with God, then into natural law, then into human law. Because don't forget that our laws are based on Christian teachings. A lot of our laws within Britain are based on Christian views. And so obviously the more parts of the hierarchy you achieve, the more of that eternal law you will understand. The fewer you follow, the harder it is to gain that eternal law and the telos of godlike perfection. I don't see it happening, but you might get a whole question in your exam on the 40 years of law. It is specified specifically on the specification by the exam board, which means that this might be the structure. How you would do it is, you would still do all of this coverall, but you'd link it in with the natural law element of the hierarchy. You'd link the human law to the euthanasia accounts, you'd link the divine law to the euthanasia accounts. So you wouldn't necessarily do a paragraph on each of these because there's not much you can say about the eternal law. You would still focus your structure around the natural law, linking it always back to this hierarchy though. Excellent. Box to the side then is, poor old Dawkins. What happens if I'm an atheist? Well, worry not, Dawkins. Aquinas believed that God made it possible for all human beings to achieve their ultimate purpose in life by the power of reason alone, no religious faith. What question then do you then ask? If you don't need religious faith and you can get to God on reason alone, what question is there? Why believe in God, exactly. So the point that Aquinas says is reason and the word of God, so combining natural and divine law, makes it easier. It is easier to reach God, easier to reach a godlike perfection by combining both of them. Those who do not believe will find it more difficult to achieve their telos, but not impossible. Problem here, of course, is if you're an atheist, why would you want to achieve godlike perfection? That's a problem you can discuss later, though. Reason given by God. Reason works out our purpose or telos. Reason helps us to work out good from bad. The focus is on reason. God's given it to all of us. We then use it to work out what's right and wrong.
The end result, however, is to become godlike perfectionists.
Yes, correct.
So, how does he argue that? What if you don't believe that you in God?
He doesn't discuss. He just assumes that everyone wants godlike perfection. That everyone will essentially want to become perfect. And so for him, even if you don't know it, that's what you want. Yeah. But still, I think that question is a valid one for evaluation. Sam, we all right?
Oh. No, that's not even part of it. What's real and apparent goods?
Oh, they're coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to that he'd argue that people that didn't win that would only, he'd call it an apparent good.
Yeah, excellent. So people that didn't want godlike perfection were following apparent goods, not real goods, because they were unaware of it. Yeah, definitely. And that's why people do wrong things, because they're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Spot on. Excellent. Box underneath then is real and apparent goods. That's where we're going. So you've got the first part of the box, and then you've got a little box, two little boxes at the side, one for apparent, one for real goods. You'll see as the slide comes up though. So that bit goes in the first part of the box, and then the two attached at the side, one bit is for apparent goods, one bit is for real goods. So you can split it up into your three different sections. Synderesis rule is good is to be done and pursued, and evil avoided. This again all links in with his conscience arguments as well. So you see a lot of overlap now between Aquinas' conscience and Aquinas' natural law. Don't forget, it was all in the same book, Summa Theologica. He isn't making lots of different books and different arguments. It's in all in one book, and it's all interlinked. We know through our rector ratio, or right reason, of basic moral principles, the thought process is called synderesis. So the thought process of, what should I do in this situation? Should I euthanize somebody? Should I turn off a life support machine? Should I give morphine to someone? This is the process of synderesis. Casuistry is the technique used to work out telos. So, what's the telos in this case? Can this person achieve their telos? Should I preserve their life, or will it help order society? So, thinking about the telos in the situation is the process of casuistry, and then when you apply it, that's conscientia, conscience in action. That's the turning off the life support machine. That's the preserving life. That's the feeding tubes, whatever it might be. That's applying your conscience. Aquinas believes that you never purposefully or deliberately pursue evil. Very different from Augustine. If you remember, Augustine argues that we are just sinful, therefore we always pick bad over good. Aquinas was far more positive. He believed we always want goodness. We never pursue bad deliberately, but sometimes we do make wrong decisions. Why? Because of apparent, not real goods. So an apparent good, you think you're doing the right thing that fits your perfect human ideal. Reason is used, but to a wrong effect. Real goods, reason is used correctly, fits with the final telos. So an example for real and apparent goods would be something like linking it to sex ethics, because that's where we're going next week. With real and apparent goods, you are married. Of course, it's always got to be in marriage. You are married. You have sex, but you don't conceive. You keep trying to have a baby, and it's just not happening. So that's an apparent good. You think you're doing the right thing, but the telos is not being achieved, which is procreation. You then go to the doctor and you find out one of you is infertile. You then can no longer have sex. If the telos of sex is purely to procreate, if one of you cannot have children, you no longer need to have sex according to natural law. Therefore, if you continue to have sex, you are doing something wrong. Whereas a real good would be have sex in marriage, have a baby. Can anybody remember the example Aquinas gave in conscience that also can link to an apparent good? Linking with sex ethics. It's the really bizarre one.
Is this the one about he didn't realise it was his wife? That he thought he was sleeping with his wife, and turns out it was actually someone else's wife.
Yeah, spot on. So the apparent good links to the story that Aquinas says about you never should deliberately sleep with someone else's wife, but if you think they're your own wife and they want you, then it's okay. That's an apparent good, because you think you're doing the right thing because you're sleeping with your own wife and she wants you, but you're not, because she's not your wife.
Did Aquinas have a wife?
No, celibate. Celibate, totally celibate. That's why he comes up with all these bizarre stories, I think. Yeah. Like bull's urine and stuff like that. He just didn't get out very much. So, moving on to the next section. Thin box underneath is just for the deontological elements. It is deontological argument. Dion, again, we know is duty, that links more to Kant's ideas, but it's still the idea that it's the actions and intentions, not the outcome. The actions of conscientia, the intentions of synderesis, are the real goods. You have to have good intentions and good actions, and therefore it's not the outcome. This is why the doctrine of double effect works, because it's all about your intentions and actions, not the outcome. Don't forget that you can't trick God. You can't pretend you have good intentions and you don't, because God knows everything. So you have to be genuine in your actions and intentions in order for natural law to be achieved. Obviously, we know where we're going underneath. The box with the numbers is obviously for your 5 primary precepts, and the box next to it is going to be for your secondary. You can bring this in at any part of an essay. It's quite good as an introduction, bringing it in, but you can bring it in with doctrine of double effect. You can bring it at any point. You can bring it in the conscientious synderesis section. It's really up to you where you bring in that it's deontological. All right, box underneath, you're doing very well. Above the numbers, you have a bit of space. That's for this bit. So above the 1 to 5 is for that part. There are laws or precepts built into nature. A precept is a law. These precepts can be understood using reason. In order for people to be able to concentrate on natural law, you need to live in a civilized society where you are free to survive and flourish. Yeah, just above the numbers. Have you got lost on your sheet?
Yeah. I've added some random stuff somewhere, but it's down. It's just a random box here.
Fair enough. Defeats the point slightly, but fair enough. And so because of this, he created 5 primary precepts. Now, and this is why I got you to research, when you did Philippa Foot, the links with Aristotle's virtue ethics. Virtue ethics used to be a topic in A2 ethics. It's a real shame it's been removed. Why? Because it really shows the foundations of ethics without God. Virtue ethics is a very, very good argument from Aristotle. Aristotle's ethics is fantastic in Nicomachean ethics. But the point I'm trying to make here is, or where I'm going with it is, Aristotle talks about trying to create a civilized society where you're free to survive and flourish. Flourishing means eudaimonia. That's where Aquinas gets this idea from, is from Aristotle's virtue ethics. So the idea of creating this civilized society is Aristotelian, which is obviously the link that you don't make now because you haven't done virtue ethics.
So you wasn't included that link in your essay?
No, absolutely, you could still include the link, yes, definitely. So you could still include the virtue ethics link, and because it's showing again how Aristotle has inspired Aquinas, so no, definitely you could bring that in. Oh yeah, and it's a good point to make actually, thank you for that, Lucy. If you do, for example, Marxism in sociology, if you've covered anything in gender studies, if you've done anything in psychology for Freud, if you see an overlap at any point that you can make relevant to the question in your exam, bring it in. Because an examiner won't think, oh, it's because they've studied psychology, or it's because they've studied sociology. They'll think, oh, it's because they've done wider reading and have wider understanding. So always make links, but you have to make it relevant to the question, otherwise you're wasting your time. All right, so your 5 are, of course, preservation of life, reproduction, education of young, living in peacefully in society, and worshipping God. They are always true, apply to everyone without exception. This is because they are direct reflections of God's eternal law.
Does it matter if you use the synonyms like the ordered society rather than living peacefully in society?
Absolutely fine, synonyms are fine, yeah. What I would recommend though is that you do keep 1 and 2 as 1 and 2. He did speak of preserving innocent life as the top one, and then obviously reproduction. 3 and 4, education and order society, you can interchange, and it is important that you keep number 5 as number 5. Why? Because again, the worshipping God is not absolutely essential, it just makes it easier. He's recommending worshipping God because your life will be easier because you get more divine law, but it's not necessary. So the 1 to 4 though are. For an argument, oh Sam, go on.
So like if you break these, then you're wrong.
Yes.
Well, what he's just like divine command theory.
He also broke.
He's saying, yeah, this is solid, but
Yeah.
he's saying, oh, you can't do these because they're not flexible and whatever it says.
Oh, I like it. Yes, it's a very good
And he's
weakness.
like,
yeah.
but here's these 5. You have to follow.
And you have to follow. Yes. So he's saying, let's not do the divine command theory because it's too rigid and strict. But you have to do these 5.
Like I'd have argued the whole point in not following divine command theory was because you'd only be following it because God's doing it. And
Yeah.
since he's deontological, then you're not doing that out of a sense of duty, so then kids can't.
Yeah.
But then he's suggesting that you need to do these, and that's not out of a sense of duty, that's a sense of him saying,
Yeah.
these 5 laws.
Excellent point. Very, very good point, and definitely relevant for your exam. So, emphasising that he's also setting a rigid structure that you need to follow, and your intentions aren't genuine in following them because you're following them because you have to follow them. It doesn't follow the deontological elements of it, absolutely. There was another point I was going to say as well. Oh, the celibate, he's going against reproduction. Yeah. Can anybody remember what he says? Shh, girls, can anyone remember what he says as a comeback on that? Because people actually said to him, yeah, but you don't reproduce because you're not married. What did he say as a comeback, Louisa?
Isn't it something like, I'm centered around God, so I need to be more godly and to have kids?
Pretty much, it was centred around God. He said it's all right for the minority called to serve God. And so actually when we do sex ethics next week, we can say actually homosexuality, things like that, isn't it all right if you're still following a life of God, then even if you are homosexual or not. So we are actually going to use his argument of it's all right for the minority called to serve God. So he uses that as the comeback on the reproduction, because people did say to him, well, you're not reproducing.
That's like what's Kant as well, isn't it? Because he says it's all right as long as that everyone does it. Like
Yeah.
as a universal.
As the universal maxim,
Yeah.
Yes.
Then it'd be all right.
Louisa?
Is that the same for infertile people then? Because if they're in the minority.
They're sinners.
No, it's a very good question, and it does, natural law does imply that therefore if you are infertile, that there's somehow something wrong or something unethical, certainly if you continue to have sex. But what it's saying with this is you'd have to make sure you do the others. It again would be harder because you're not going to achieve them all, but you've obviously got a different telos or a different path to getting there, because being infertile is not something that you can control, therefore being punished for them is not fair. So what a natural lawist would argue is that you have to focus on the others and you have a different way to get to godlike perfection.
But would they be in the minority anyway?
And they'd be in the minority, yes. Yeah. Very, very good questions. Very good points. We then have... Oh, is that the quote that goes with that one? Let me just see where we're going. Quote with that. Yes. Please put the quote in the box next to your 5 primary precepts. This is from Pope Paul VI. Pope Paul, you don't have to write all of this down. The doctrines of the Catholic Church. He says the Church, in urging men to the observance of the precepts of natural law, teaches as absolutely required that any use whatsoever of marriage must retain its natural potential to procreate human life. You can paraphrase it. The few dots in the middle means that the section has been taken out. That is so important though. What it is showing you is how the Catholic Church are taking on the natural law teachings, and it actually says it for you. So even if you just write observance of the precepts of the natural law and quote it to Pope Paul, that's fine. Even if you do the marriage must retain its natural potential, that's a fantastic link for both natural and sex ethics. It is a very, very important quote. Examiners love Pope quotes. So it doesn't matter which Pope you quote, but I think natural law, as an answer with natural law, without mentioning how they've inspired the Catholic Church, how they've inspired certain popes, massive gap. So natural law heavily influences the doctrines of the Catholic Church. As soon as you're happy, please turn over your sheets. What don't you understand?
No, I just didn't know that's
All right. So. All right. Box at the top then is for your secondary precepts. These, every primary precept can develop into secondary precepts, which are practical human rules that govern our daily behaviours. The primary precepts are set in stone. The secondary precepts vary from laws of the land to codes of family behaviour. So a secondary precept might be, you have a curfew. You need to be home at 11:30 at night, or 10 on a school night, of course, and that's your rules of your family, because it links in with ordered society of the primary precept, or it links in with education because they want you to have a good night's sleep. So all primary precepts can be developed into secondary precepts. These are far more realistic and flexible. The next slide will go over this again, but you need to be very, very careful. In an exam, do not say the primary precept of preservation of life means do not euthanise. You are wrong. What you are doing is you're combining your primary and secondary together. You have to say the primary precept is preserve life because all life is sacred and important. This means the secondary precept is do not euthanise. The example is always the secondary. You have to make sure you keep it clear between your primary and your secondary.
Could you conflict them? So in saying like, if you killed a murderer, you're contributing to an ordered society, but
Yeah.
you're also not preserving life.
Excellent. Absolutely. The primary precepts often conflict, which again make it very unclear by which one is. None of them are flexible, so how do you know what decision to make? Like the ordered society with euthanasia, you've got to preserve life, but then you have lots of people on life support machines. We're significantly low on funding for the NHS. People are wanting to end their lives. People are like Tony Nicholson, please let me die. And we're saying no. How does that then result in an ordered society? So yeah, very good. Alright, so as I said, the box underneath helps you with your exam structure. So it's split into 4, that's the 4 boxes. This is, so just write it as you see it, don't answer the questions, write it as you see it here. The first step you do, so primary precept paragraph going into secondary should be at least half to 3/4 of a page. If you do primary and secondary precepts in anything less than that, you've done it wrong. The first step you have to do is you have to say what the terms primary and secondary mean. Primary obviously being first, foundational, basic, like primary school. Secondary, like secondary school, builds upon them, develops it, etc. What do they imply? It implies that one comes first, one is important, the second one, the secondary builds upon it. Think of it like your primary and secondary sources, your primary and secondary colours, whatever it is that you need to think of to remember. And what is the meaning of precept? Law. So as soon as you start writing about primary precepts, you need to say what they mean. So primary precepts, primary means the basic foundational laws established for everyone to follow. Next step is you outline the 5. The 5 primary precepts are blah, 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 blah. You then need to say, why is each primary precept important? Why did Aquinas pick them? What is the importance of education? What is the importance of an ordered society? So ordered society could be linking it to Aristotle's inspiration of human flourishing. Education to develop reason. Reproduction so the human race continues. It doesn't matter what you put, but you have to explain why he picked them. The 4th and final step is you then link it to a secondary example, which of course would be euthanasia in your exam. Lucy.
So do you have to explain each primary precept like that?
I certainly would. Depends on the question. Depends if the question asks you to compare natural law and situations with euthanasia, then you might want to do it quicker because obviously that's a massive. If it's just focused on natural law, this is kind of your pass-fail territory. So I would say the more leaving out the divine command theory, it's no big deal. Leaving out parent and real goods, no big deal. This needs to be done properly. So I'd say definitely focus on this.
For the 5 primary precepts, are they in like any ranking order? Are they all
So
just
I would keep your 1 and 2 at the top, your order and education, either way, and then your worship God as 5.
So does he see number 1 as the most important?
Yes, preserving life's most important, yes. Just going on from that point before, in your exam, you are wasting your time if you link it to another example that's not relevant to either euthanasia for natural or situation ethics, business for Kant, utilitarianism, or sex ethics. Why are you wasting your time? Because those are the links the examiners want you to make. So if you talk about do not murder for a secondary, why are you talking about do not murder? Talk about euthanasia. Always link it to a relevant example, otherwise you're not going to get all your marks. Any example's better than no example, but try and link it to euthanasia as much as you can. Are we happy with that? Are we alright with that one? Doctrine of double effect. There are times when you cannot do good without bad consequences. In other words, you do something you know is good, but it has a bad outcome. To solve this dilemma, we have the doctrine of double effect. Always wrong to do bad intentionally to bring out good. You cannot do something bad like killing Hitler, even though you know it'll do something good, save thousands of people, millions of people, you still cannot do it. You cannot do something bad to bring out something good. But sometimes right to do good actions despite knowing it'll bring about bad consequences. So do a good action even though you can predict something bad will happen. Bad is unintended but predictable. I'll let you write that down and I'll go over that slowly again in a second. Now, the doctrine of double effect is one of those areas that students never write very well. They always don't explain it properly or don't apply it properly. It's the part at the bottom of that slide that's the important bit. The bits in bold are bold for a reason. Those are just the words you have to use. So you do write, even if you know something bad's going to happen. The bad, though, is unintended. You don't intend it to happen. But it is foreseen. It's predictable. So another example, so the next slide's going to be an example that you can use in your exam because it's linked with euthanasia. But another example to help you understand it is something like in marriage. If a woman has very, very bad skin or really heavy menstrual cycle, they might go to the doctors and say, I'd like to take a contraceptive pill to help that. Contraceptive pill means you cannot reproduce. So their intention has to be genuine. Her intention is either to help with a painful menstrual cycle or to help with really bad skin. Even though the foreseen is predictable, if you take a contraceptive pill, you're not going to conceive. The foreseen outcome is bad, but it's not your intention. You have to be genuine, though. This is not a loophole. This isn't a quick sly on the side with your husband. Oh, we'll just go and tell the we'll go tell the Pope. No, of course you will. We'll go and tell the priest that we're doing it because I have a bad time of the month. But really, we just don't want to have babies yet. No, your intention has to be genuine. Alfie.
Surely you can apply it the other way though, because taking the contraceptive pill on its own is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Good outcomes. So surely you would say that it's like the killing Hitler thing again, because you're doing something
Bad to bring about good.
Yeah, but it's the intention.
Yeah, so your intention is always to murder somebody in the Hitler example, whereas your intention is a genuinely good thing because you're trying to change something that you can't control in the first place. Yeah, fair question still. I've lost it again. Yeah. Box to the side then is for the example that you can use in your exam. This is the link to the Roman Catholic Church. They are opposed to euthanasia, full stop. They see euthanasia as murder. The Pope even said that this was a grave violation of the law of God meaning the divine law. However, if a doctor gives a large dosage of morphine to eliminate the patient's pain and this results in death, this is seen as the doctrine of double effect, not euthanasia. The intention is to relieve their pain, but a doctor knows that if you give someone a lot of morphine, it may result in their heart stopping and them dying. Their intention is to relieve their pain, not to kill the patient.
Is that an example given by the church?
No, that's an example that you can give in the exam. So that's an example of how you link it to euthanasia. And this is an example that the church would accept, though,
They
as the
haven't
doctrine of,
said
but they haven't said that, no. This is not a loophole. Do not call it a loophole. This is not a way around the rules or around the teachings. This is not a way of getting around the precepts such as reproduction or preserving life in this case. Your intentions have to be true. Otherwise it does not work. Louisa?
With that example though, wouldn't the doctors have to discuss it first?
Oh yeah, doctors would have to discuss it. They discuss it with the family.
That's the intention.
No,
No, you
No, but that,
it's not like euthanasia where you go and get an injection and die. It's when you're like already dying, but it's just painful. So
I know,
you
but
get
you could,
morphine
yeah, so
instead.
if you say to the parent, like whatever the family, and
Yeah.
say, right, I'm going to give them more morphine, they're probably going to die, that's not the intention.
yeah.
No, but they're
I feel that's a
if
bit-
you're giving someone that much
Clearly
morphine to kill them, then
their
they're going to be dying
intention
anyway in the next like few hours, just really painfully. So you give them morphine to help with the pain.
If they're not dying, they're just in no pain.
Yeah, but then you wouldn't if they weren't dying, you wouldn't give them loads of morphine to kill them.
No, that's the intention to kill them. If it's not
No, it's not in the intent. Yeah, right. Let
No,
me
the
let me
intention is to eat
re-explain. Yeah, Sam's got it as far as what it's trying to say is when you are in hospice care, for example, or when you are we're talking about the most pain you can have is when you get high amounts of morphine. You get very, very low levels of morphine that will never ever kill you. But like any drug, you then get used to it. So then they have to increase this morphine slowly. And so you get to a point where you've been poorly for so long and you're in so much pain that you then get to a point where the morphine no longer works and the doctor then has to make a decision. Do I give them some more morphine, knowing that it might kill them, or do I let them just suffer in pain? No, my intention as a doctor is to relieve pain and to take that risk. It might not kill them. People have different susceptibilities. It's all based on are you a man, are you a woman, what's your weight, what's your age, what's your health. So it might not kill them. So their intention is always to relieve the pain with the predicted potential outcome of death. Of course, they could, if they gave so much morphine and it killed them, that's a lethal injection. Then it doesn't work. What they're saying is because they've given them so much so far, one bit more might happen. So they just have to prepare for any eventuality. So they have to say, look, if I give you some more morphine, you're now at the top, it might be all right, or it might have adverse effects. So that's where it's coming from. Their intention is always to relieve their pain, never to kill them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Still a very good question, though. Excellent. Box underneath, evaluation time. One big box is for your strengths. So this first box is for your strengths. It is based on reason, so technically open to everyone who can use reason. It's focused on the search for happiness and fulfillment, so it's positive. Children seem to have this innate sense of RW right and wrong, and natural law can appeal to this. So children seem to just know what is right and what is wrong, what they shouldn't do. This implies the God-given gift of reason. This implies that natural law might have some ground in this idea that everyone is given these ways to work out what is good and bad, right and wrong. The Christian version from Thomas Aquinas unites faith with reason. Now this is a huge strength. Natural law is revolutionary for its time. Aquinas lived in a time, as we said, that was the divine command theory, very, very strictly Christian. And what Aquinas was saying, this was a time when science and faith did not go together. Aquinas then said, but hang on a minute, we can combine God still with science, meaning everybody has an opportunity to be ethical. Everybody can find out what is right and wrong, what they should and shouldn't do. That was revolutionary for his time. He did something unheard of. Even nowadays, we have a science versus religion. How can you be a religious scientist? We still even have this debate today. So we're talking about a very, very early way of getting around that problem. Primary precepts prove an absolute framework, so applies the same principle to everyone. Clear cut and straightforward. So again, should be accessible, fairly easy to follow. Reproduction, what does that mean? No, fairly obvious. You know, it's not difficult laws to follow. Establishes common and universal rules. Everybody is treated equally. Everyone has the same rules to follow. And you should be able to find answers to ethical dilemmas because it's more concrete than personal opinion, and he also recognises the secondary precepts adapt from them. They're also timeless. The primary precepts could be said to apply to all people throughout time. Aquinas made these in like 1274 or something. That's about the time he lived. I'm not sure if that was when he died or not. But we're talking about over 1,000 years ago. Or nearly 1,000 years ago. But we're talking about a long, long time ago that he made these, and they're still relevant today. We still need reproduction. We still need to preserve innocent life. We still need education. Very few teachings we ever look at that are this old still have just as much application today as they did back then. Excellent. Final box has 3 different slides to go in it. It's doable. The box is big enough. It's absolutely fine. But just so that you know. So the first, that's fine. Second precepts allow flexibility. The first set of weaknesses are these. So these are the general weaknesses. We're then going to have the philosophical or the philosopher weaknesses. So the first weakness of natural law is, what is actually natural? Is it natural to give somebody a pacemaker, an organ transplant, a life support machine, even though you're preserving life? Is it therefore natural? Are you using your reason, which is a natural gift from God, to work it out? But again, what is natural? Quite general rules, not very adaptable or simple to apply to individual situations. Nature changes via evolution, so does this mean natural law changes too? And if so, how can it be an absolute theory? Finally, natural law NL, please don't do that in your exam, that's shorthand and it's lazy, so you have to put natural law each time. Some principles of natural law when applied lead to absurd conclusions, like infertile couples cannot have sex because you only should have sex to reproduce, or that vegetarianism, for example, is unnatural. You have meat-eating teeth that are meant to eat meat by nature. That means that vegetarians therefore are unnatural. Absurd conclusions. Within the same box, please. Within the same box, we have the philosophical weaknesses. So philosophical weaknesses meaning the philosophers. We have Dawkins in The Selfish Gene. He would argue there is no God governing creation. It's all through evolution. G.E. Moore would question, what does it mean by real and apparent good? What does good mean? Karl Barth, his main argument always is you shouldn't trust reason. Whenever reason comes up in any argument, same as for Kant says it relies on reason. Karl Barth would argue that reason is flawed. You should never rely on your reason, you should go straight to divine law or scripture. Karl Barth says that throughout all topics. He comes in the DCT topics. Whenever you focus on the idea of reason, Karl Barth's a relevant point. Don't forget, they are not evaluative points as they stand there. You have to say, are they fair or not? Do they work or not? If you just put them in your exam, you're just restating someone else's view. You are not evaluating until you use a critical word. One more slide just for Kai Nielsen. Again, not a big point, so you should fit it in the box quite easily. Excellent. Final slide, final point is for Kai Nielsen. He says there is no one unified human nature. So Aquinas says we all want to do good and avoid evil. Aquinas says we all want the synderesis rule. What Kai Nielsen's saying is no, there is not one unified, one universal human nature. Human nature alters over cultural relatives and moral standards in society. So what he's saying is it differs over culture. It's relative to the culture you're in. And so what your beliefs are, like we are quite open now as a society about homosexuality. We are quite open about transgender, gender fluid. You go to Saudi Arabia, that would be absolutely unheard of. Why? Because of the culture that you are brought up in. So your culture affects the views that you have, the standards that you hold. So we might argue that it's natural to be homosexual. We might argue that homosexuality is seen within nature, therefore it is natural. Somebody from a different culture might not say that. And so that's what Kyle Neeson is arguing there. Vardy and Grosh, last of all, Aquinas' view on human nature is just too simplistic. Do good and avoid evil. It's too simple. Are we really that clear-cut? Quite reductionist in that way. Does anybody have any natural law questions? Your comments through that were very, very good. All right, excellent. Well done, everyone.